Right out of here. That's right, the Prime Minister's ethics advisor has resigned. We'll be exploring the latest from Westminster today on The Briefing. Also, the leaders of Germany, of France and Italy are in Ukraine today. What's going on? We'll talk to a Ukrainian MP. So much more to come on the show, all after the headlines.
Thank you, Tom. Good morning. It's 9:31. Here are your news headlines. Boris Johnson's been dealt a fresh blow after his ethics advisor resigned last night. In a brief statement, Lord Geit said with regret he feels it's the right thing to do. He's the second ethics advisor to resign under the Prime Minister in 3 years. Downing Street says Mr Johnson's surprised by the resignation. The wife of a missing British journalist in Brazil has said she can now bring her husband home after bodies were found. Dom Phillips and Indigenous expert Bruno Pereira were last seen in the Amazon over 10 days ago. The Brazilian government said the remains were discovered near where the pair disappeared. The bodies have yet to be formally identified. Tenants will be given more powers to challenge poor practices and unjustified rent increases by their landlords. That's as part of the government's new deal for private renters in England. The publication of a new government white paper later will also end blanket bans on families with children and those on benefits. Oscar-winning actor Kevin Spacey is due to appear in London court after being charged with sexually assaulting 3 men. The 62-year-old's facing 4 counts of sexual assault and 1 count of causing a person to engage in sexual activity without consent. Mr Spacey denies the allegations. And archaeologists working on an HS2 site have discovered a burial ground containing nearly 140 graves. The site in Wendover, Buckinghamshire, is one of the largest Anglo-Saxon burial grounds ever uncovered in Britain. One skeleton was found with an iron object embedded in its spine, which experts believe may have contributed to their deaths. Items from the 5th and 6th centuries were also found, including brooches, amber beads and knives. TV Online and DAB Plus Radio, this is GB News. Now it's back to The Briefing with Tom.
A very good morning to you. It's 9:34 and this is The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, on your TV and your radio. Now to news that broke last night in Westminster, of course. Leading the day, Boris Johnson's second ethics advisor, Lord Geit, has resigned. In one short statement, the respected advisor simply said it was the right thing to do. Geit took on the role last year. His predecessor, Sir Alex Allen, resigned after the Prime Minister stuck by Priti Patel following a report by Sir Alex, which accused the Home Secretary of bullying. It took 5 months to replace Sir Alex with Lord Geit. Now the search for a new ethics advisor is on in earnest. Well, let's talk through it all now with the political editor of The Express Online, David Maddox. Welcome to the programme, David. I suppose, first of all, why now? Why did Lord Geit choose this week to resign after all of the opportunities he's had over the last 6 months?
Well, that's still a bit of a mystery, Tom, actually. And, of course, we've still not been allowed to see the letter yet, the resignation letter yet, which is unusual, to say the least. If it was a minister, we would see a resignation letter. Why now, when frankly, he could have resigned, many times. But it has to be said that the big picture is not good for the Prime Minister. You know, he's had 148 MPs of his own MPs have no confidence in him. And now, to lose one ethics advisor is pretty poor, but to lose 2, is beginning to show a bit of a pattern, unfortunately.
And yet I suppose many people would have felt that this is almost priced in. Lord Geit had threatened to resign on a number of occasions and had a pretty tough select committee hearing before the PACAC committee earlier, just a few days ago. Potentially, this isn't going to change the minds of that many MPs.
No, and I think this is what's on the Prime Minister's side. So many of these things are kind of expected and as you say, are baked in. I mean, we've got the same issue coming up next week with the by-elections. The Conservatives defending two seats, expected to be embarrassed in both of them and lose both of them. But because everybody's assuming this is going to happen anyway, but the Prime Minister somehow rolls on and survives further. I mean, in the end, he's unassailable for 12 months. Let's be frank about it. Whatever happens to him, he's almost unassailable for 12 months, unless his cabinet turn on him, and there's no evidence of that happening.
I suppose then the risk is a cabinet reshuffle. There were many rumours that Boris Johnson may be considering one, although we haven't seen many hints of one yet. Potentially it suits the Prime Minister to keep everyone in their own jobs and not upset the apple cart too much as he rides this through.
Well, exactly, and his advantage at the moment is he's surrounded by loyalists. I mean, one MP was saying to me yesterday in Parliament that one of the reasons that it was maybe slightly cruel of him, but one of the reasons that the cabinet hadn't turned on him was that many of them wouldn't have another job if there was a different Prime Minister. But there is a lot of talk about a reshuffle. Frankly, if he wants to relaunch his government for the umpteenth time, then he will need to have a reshuffle. There's a need for new blood. There's a need for fresh ideas. We're all going in to Parliament these days, and there seems to be nothing going on. There seems to be nothing happening. And that's very much a talk amongst MPs. You know, we have these great crises like the cost of living crisis, we have war, of course. We have all sorts of things going, but the government seems to be doing very little, and it seems to be caught in a kind of stasis at the moment around the Prime Minister's future and various scandals and resignations, unfortunately.
I suppose to counter that, the government would say that they've been acting when it comes to the cost of living crisis. We're going to start seeing hundreds of pounds being sent out to people around the country as part of a £37 billion package to ease the cost of living. I suppose that is something that's being done. But on the other hand, the Prime Minister said just a week ago that you can't spend your way out of inflation. It does seem that the government is pushing forward mixed messages where it is doing things.
Well, again, and this is the problem. Another problem. There doesn't seem to be a clear direction. That as you just said, on one hand they're handing out hundreds of pounds, which, frankly, I'd be surprised if it's enough for a lot of the families who are stuck in some real serious problems in terms of But unfortunately, they don't have to pay for heat at the moment because of the wonderful weather. But I mean, in terms of buying food for their children and things like that. So I wonder, if a £400 per household is going to really cut the mustard. But it's, But on the other hand, he's promising tax cuts, but they never come. We never have any timetable for anything. There's a whole load of legislation that was promised in the Queen's speech on various things, not least on delivering on Brexit, which his backbenchers are desperate for him to do, and yet we see no real progress on it. So they're stuck on the Rwanda issue, which is turning into an absolute nightmare for them. And, there's a lot of people saying, well, it's good news that the ECHR has done this. It shows that, another foreign court. Well, the problem is they need to make this policy work. For their own political base, for winning back the red wall seats and all these sorts of things. It's got to work. It can't just be a political stunt.
And I suppose the Prime Minister has got some deadlines, if not them written in, because, of course, the executive of the 1922 committee could change the rules. There could be another vote, although listening to the words of Lord Frost last week, it seems that potentially the next big deadline is October, that the Prime Minister needs to get those tax cuts on the table, needs to deliver some more things and prove himself by party conference.
I think so. And it would be interesting to see if party members turn on the Prime Minister and ministers at party conference. It's very unusual in the Conservative Party for that to happen. It's something you expect much more at Labour Party conferences, but it's not impossible at all, especially if people continue to be as angry as they are about what's going on. So in the end, though, I don't think the rules are going to be changed. Graham Brady, the chairman of the 1922 committee, seems to be pretty opposed to that. He seems to think that it's unfair. That's not to say, though, that there won't be another vote in 12 months, even if we're getting close to an election. A lot of MPs I'm speaking to think there will be, and frankly, are putting their letters in already on the hope that there will be.
Blimey, well, that is always an issue. I suppose we need to watch those executive members of the 1922 committee very, very closely, because that rule change is the big point of danger. But until it happens, I suppose the Prime Minister safer maybe now than he was a couple of weeks ago, although he always does seem to stand on that precipice. David Mallix, thanks so much for joining us this morning. Really appreciate your time and thoughts there. Now, the French President Emmanuel Macron, German Chancellor Olaf Scholz and Italian Prime Minister Mario Draghi have been pictured travelling together in a train. The leaders of Germany, France and Italy were pictured by La Repubblica this morning on a train from the Polish border to Kiev, where they are due to hold talks with the Ukrainian government. President Zelensky is set to push European countries to send more weapons and go further on sanctions too. Just to remind everyone, today is day 112 of Russia's brutal war against Ukraine. Well, here to tell us more about it is the Ukrainian MP and leader of the Golos party, Kira Rudik. Welcome to the programme, Kira. Really good to have you on. I suppose, what are the big asks that Ukraine needs to ask of the leaders of Germany, Italy and France?
Hello, thank you so much for having me. Well, our big asks are, first, give us more weapons and give it to us faster, because it's only right now when we started receiving the support from the countries that promised to us 3 months ago. Second point is related to the candidacy in EU, which is extremely important for Ukrainian people, and we are waiting on the that will be announced next week. We do need this.
Just need to pause you there, Kira, for a second, because Kevin Spacey is arriving at the Westminster Magistrates Court. We're catching a glimpse of the American actor who is facing accusations in England. Here he is standing at his car. He'll be walking across to Westminster Magistrates Court. Just some breaking news there. The American actor Kevin Spacey, of course, someone who has lived in London for some time, as well as living in California as an actor. He is famed for his roles in the Netflix drama House of Cards, as well as many other feature films. That is, of course, until the scandal broke about his alleged impropriety. He's standing in the middle there in a throng of photographers as he makes his way from his car to Westminster Magistrates Court. Of course, he'll be standing there today, accused of multiple acts of sexual impropriety. He's in the middle of a throng of photographers. No doubt this will be a news story that picks up quite a big deal of news. We'll be following this, of course, on GBNews throughout the day. There he is, just being pushed inside the building there. Well, that was Kevin Spacey. I do apologise, Kira Rudik, for some breaking news there. Let's get back to what's going on in Ukraine, because you're demanding more weapons, but the European leaders, the leaders of particularly Germany perhaps, have been pretty reticent to give those weapons.
Yes, and this is why the meetings today are expected to be resolutions to this delays in the weapons that we are receiving from these countries, and we hope to get more promises and more actual support. 3 points: weapons, support in EU candidacy, and the third, and very important, is the next package of sanctions, package 7, that should include the ban on Russian gas. These are the 3 main areas that need to be discussed today, and I'm sure that there will be several results based on this visit. We need to remember as well that both Scholz, Macron, and Draghi, they all are also executing on their internal political agendas, especially President Macron, who is in lieu of his parliamentary elections. So the visit to Ukraine should also give them necessary support inside the country for the decisions that they will be making.
It will be a fascinating exchange of views, of course, because those European leaders have been accused of not going far enough to support Ukraine. We'll follow it very closely and see if they agree to anything meaningful. But for now, Kira Rudik, thank you for speaking to us live from Kiev there. Kira Rudik, the Ukrainian MP. Well, now to culture, because international initiative More in Common has released a groundbreaking new report this morning exploring British attitudes towards the gender debate. In one of the biggest studies ever into British public opinion in gender identity, comprising focus groups and polling research, the study has revealed what is perhaps a surprising finding. Outside the loud echo chambers of the internet, real Britain is far more harmonious and indeed compassionate than might have been expected. Well, Luke Trill is director of More in Common and can join us now live on the programme. Thanks for coming on. I suppose, what were the biggest takeaways of this research?
Well, I think by far the biggest takeaway is that there is a total disconnect between the very loud, quite divisive debate that we see about issues of gender identity and trans inclusion on social media and how the public think about these issues. What was really striking was in every conversation that we had in a focus group about trans people, that when the public sort of started talking about the issues, they started from a place of compassion and kindness. We heard time and time again, gosh, it must be really difficult to struggle with your gender identity, to identify with a gender which wasn't the sex that you were assigned at birth. And what can we do to make trans people's lives easier? How can we make sure they feel included? It's interesting, we talked a lot, as you would imagine, about pronouns. And most people said, look, I don't particularly want to have to display my own pronouns. I'm totally happy for other people to, and to call them what they want to be called, to refer to them how they want to be referred to. And similarly in schools as well, there was this sense that we need to create safe spaces. We need to talk about trans people in schools, which I thought was quite interesting and important. And we need to make sure that we tackle bullying as well. Now, there were some other issues where the public had more concerns, so particularly on the issue of sport. The public didn't support the idea of trans female athletes competing in women-only sports. But again, when the public talked about it, it wasn't this kind of very heated kind of online vitriol that you see. It was, gosh, yeah, no, I appreciate this must be really difficult if you're a trans athlete and you've trained, all your life for these competitions. But for us, it's just an issue of fairness. So the public are really approaching these issues from a very different starting point. And we think there's an opportunity, actually, for the kind of elite debate, you might call it, to actually listen to what the public are saying, to build on that and actually find a way forward.
It's interesting looking at sort of the crunch points in your research, because it seems like there's a worry, perhaps, for some people about being able to speak freely, feeling like they can't talk about this issue. And perhaps one way that we can build bridges and find more in common is by fostering a greater sort of sense of open debate and free speech in this area.
Completely, you've hit the nail on the head with that, Tom. Like, what we found was that where people did start to become resentful was this sense of, I'm going to be shouted at for making a mistake, I'm going to be labelled a bigot if I ask questions, I have these genuine concerns, am I allowed to talk about them? And actually, if you create this space, and in fact, lots of people in the focus group said that they were grateful. This is the first time that they sort of felt able to talk about these issues. So I think we need to do more to create that space. But one of the interesting things that came out of research was that lots of people said that workplace diversity and inclusion training wasn't doing that at the moment, that very often it was sort of a series of tick boxes. You can say this, you can't say that, rather than creating a kind of environment where people felt they could ask questions about concepts which, to lots of people, they are alien. I should say as well that, when we polled people, only 2% said that they thought the debate around trans equality was one of the most important issues facing the country. This, for some people, this is quite far removed, and we need to take time to explain things to people, to let people ask questions, to let people make mistakes, and above all, recognise that most people start from a position of goodwill.
Well, it's a really important message and a fascinating report. Luke Trill, thank you so much for talking us through that research there. Really, really interesting stuff. Well, just finally today on the programme, a major conference is taking place in London next week, focusing on how the United Kingdom can become a real scientific superpower. The UK is already home to world-leading innovation in life sciences, energy, future transport and even space. Yet the question remains, how can we fully unlock the country's innovation potential and unleash a global Britain? Well, I'm delighted to be joined in the studio by Matt Allen, the director of Bidwell, who are organising the conference. Welcome to the programme. I suppose, first of all, what is a science superpower? How can Britain become one?
Well, Tom, I mean, if you look at UK, we're very, very good at creating world-changing ideas. And we've got researchers who are solving some of the problems of the biggest global challenges. But I think within the Oxford-Cambridge arc, we have the potential to accelerate that and become a scientific superpower. But what we're not good at in the UK is taking those ideas, commercialising them, creating new industries and world-leading businesses on the back of that. We want to try and change that. So we're bringing people together at the QE2 on Monday. We've got 500 people coming from the biggest global investors, from developers, innovators and academics, coming together to talk about the policies, to talk about the infrastructure needed and the government support that will help accelerate this sector. The private sector is there. It's ready to unleash the potential of global Britain as a scientific superpower. We need government to back us, to help us unlock that and do what it said it's been wanting to do for a while in terms of creating scientific superpower. The time now is for action. I
suppose it's really key here to deliver growth and innovation and the rest of it. You need the infrastructure to do it. It's very well having places in the United Kingdom like Cambridge that have world-leading research, but they're quite small on the international scale of things. Cambridge is, a city of 150 million people. I suppose when it comes to delivering greater growth in that area, but growth that 150,000, I should say, not 150 million. When it comes to delivering greater growth, I mean, it would be an incredibly growth area if it had 150 million people in it. Not that that's being suggested by anyone, but how does that infrastructure, how can infrastructure deliver growth and work as well with the private sector?
I think there's a few things to say there, Tom. If you look at the potential for Oxford and Cambridge ecosystems and what they can do for the broader country in terms of how they can support the economy nationally, how they can support parts of the country that need levelling up, but they're not getting that support at the moment. If you look at Oxford University R&D, for example, for every £1 invested in that, £10 is generated across the wider economy. And businesses like AstraZeneca, we have 2,500 scientists in Cambridge, create 50,000 direct and indirect jobs across the country. But we're in a situation now where we've got the Treasury investing £1 billion into a railway system to connect that up, but it's only half built. And who wants a half-built railway? We've also got the problem in Oxford and Cambridge at the moment, where there is zero available lab space. And we've got 1 million square foot of demand from global scientific businesses, spin-outs, and grow-on businesses from those ecosystems. So there's a big, big problem that needs to be solved.
It's interesting, though, because when you talk to the government, they're often talking about levelling up. And those conversations can leave out places that are genuine drivers of growth, places that can actually help the rest of the country by growing as well. Is there a disconnect here between the sort of scientific community and indeed those who want to see greater innovation, development and growth out of the areas that we have and the government that, frankly, would rather talk about other areas?
Yeah, I mean, I think if you look at it, the Oxford and the Levelling Up programme is a very valid programme for the country, but it can't be delivered at the expense of our world-leading scientific ecosystems. So if you look at Oxford and Cambridge ARC particularly, failure to support that from the government would result in a loss of 50 billion GDP by 2030. That money could be used to invest in bankrolling Levelling Up and also to repair the country's economy following COVID.
Now, just to explore the ARC for a second, a lot of people will be hearing it for the first time, won't know exactly what it is. We only have a small amount of time at the end of the programme, but just your elevator pitch. Why is the ARC important?
The Ark is important because it is there. It is probably the biggest global brand we have in science and technology. We can create things across the rest of the UK, but they would take years and years and years to deliver. The Ark is there, it's oven ready, and it can really deliver for the country.
Really, really interesting stuff there, trying to connect up these two areas of great innovation potential. Well, we're at the end of the programme, but I'm really delighted that you've been able to come in and talk about these issues, really important for growth in the UK. And I suppose we'll see you on Monday at your conference. Thank you very much for joining us here on The Briefing. That's it for the show today. Coming up tomorrow, it's To The Point, of course, with Mercy and Bev Turner. But first, here's the weather.
Hello, good morning. I'm Aidan McGibbon from the Met Office. A fine start for most of us and warming up quickly with plenty of strong sunshine around, but not everyone will see the sunshine. Cloud and rain will affect parts of Scotland and Northern Ireland. A cold front moves in here and it will stick around for much of the day. High pressure further south, meanwhile, allows a lot of sunshine and light winds with building temperatures throughout the day. So for much of England, Wales, southern and eastern Scotland, sunny spells during the morning. Western Scotland, Northern Ireland sees thicker cloud and some showers come along, but those showers will also push into eastern Scotland and perhaps the far north of England by the afternoon. Plenty of sunshine elsewhere, further south across the UK, mid to high 20s, 29 Celsius likely for London and the southeast, 22 for Aberdeen, so still relatively warm here, but more like 18 to 20 for the rest of Scotland and Northern Ireland. And it's across Scotland and Northern Ireland where thicker cloud and some more persistent rain turns up overnight. Heavy rain there for western Scotland, persistent damp weather for the north and the east of Scotland, and some outbreaks of rain further south into Northern Ireland and southern Scotland. Again, further south, clear spells, but a mild night, a muggy night in places, and a warm start to Friday. Temperatures rising from the word go for much of England, Wales, southern and eastern Scotland. Now, for the rest of Scotland, as well as Northern Ireland, again, we've got thicker cloud and some outbreaks of rain, and that rain will fringe into the far north of England at times as well. Mid-20s in the north of England, low 20s for Scotland and